After studying this module, you shall be able to identify key macroeconomic issues, having an initial understanding regarding the viewpoints of classical vis-a-vis Keynesian economists, differentiate between microeconomics and macroeconomics, understand the importance of studying macroeconomics, learning about several relevant macroeconomic issues, for example, level of aggregate output, unemployment, inflation, budget deficit, etc. Analyze key macroeconomic indicators for India, such as economic growth and external account balance. Issues such as unemployment, inflation, GDP growth rate, and exchange rate are commonly used in the day-to-day conversation of policy makers, media persons, and even the common man. These are related to macro aspects of the economy. The branch of economics that deals with the study of these aspects is known as macroeconomics. Unlike the micro aspects that deal with analysis of the behavior of a single entity, such as a firm, a consumer, a worker, or an investor, macroeconomic variables capture the aggregate behavior of all agents, such as households, farms, and government in an economy. For instance, the aggregate consumption function is based on total plant consumption expenditure of all the agents and its relation with aggregate income in an economy. Similarly, the investment function is based on total plant investment of all the firms in an economy. Thus, microeconomic analysis focus on the performance of a single unit in an economy, while the macroeconomic analysis tries to capture the performance of all units in an economy and study their implications. As may be obvious to you, while we study the behavior of a single unit, a large number of other things are kept constant. For instance, in microeconomics, while studying the law of demand, you may have read the assumption of ceteris paribus. Thus means all other factors apart from price of the commodity are assumed constant. However, in macroeconomics, the behavior of a lot of interlinked variables have to be considered simultaneously to understand how aggregate variables are determined in an economy. Major school of thoughts, a brief overview. A large number of complex economic ideas, beginning with the classical school of thought, have emerged over time. The classical school of thought have emerged over time. The classicals believed in a free market economy with least government interference. They believed that if left on its own, markets would adjust automatically and reach the full employment equilibrium driven by the wage and price flexibility. The full employment level is attained when all resources in the economy are fully utilized. The Great Depression of 1930s questioned the validity of the classical beliefs of laissez-faire, that is, minimal government interference and full employment. During the same period, John Maynard Keynes published his classic, The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money. Unlike the classical economist, Keynes believed that active government intervention was necessary to enhance the low level of aggregate demand in the economy and pull it out of depression. The limitations of Keynesian theory were attacked by monetarists, also known as new classical economists. Despite its limitations, Keynesian economics remains an essential pillar supporting the foundations of modern macroeconomics. As we shall see in this course, the study of macroeconomics will provide an understanding of the major economic issues facing countries today and provide insights into key variables that shape aggregate economic outcomes. Importance of macroeconomics. The present module attempts to take you through a macroeconomic exploration of the main issues faced by countries across the world. These issues have become extremely relevant in understanding the fiscal and monetary policy stance of governments. Macroeconomic models are routinely used by policy makers for addressing problems related to growing unemployment, rising inflation, and falling rates of economic growth. Further, continuous changes are taking place in the global macroeconomic arena. Analysis of these developments offer insights into how such situations may be dealt with in the future. For instance, macroeconomic analysis helps to understand the reasons underlying the recent global financial crisis in terms of its key drivers and the appropriate policy response. Such analyses help in seeking answers to questions such as why do financial crises occur frequently and grip countries across the world at an alarming rate. Central macroeconomic issues. A number of macroeconomic variables will be discussed in this course. Some of them are national income and related aggregates such as gross national product (GNP), gross domestic product (GDP), national savings and investment. Indicators to assess price changes such as price deflators, inflation and deflation index, unemployment and output, policies such as fiscal and monetary policy, external indicators such as exchange rate, that is appreciation and depreciation, and balance of payments, deficit or surplus. It is important for an economist to understand these concepts and definitions, factors affecting these variables and interlinkages among them. This is crucial for suggesting suitable policy prescriptions. Wherever these deviate from optimal levels, these variables will be defined and concepts developed in detail through the various modules in this course. Every government needs to emphasize and strive for higher levels of output, lower levels of unemployment, and low and stable rates of inflation. At this stage, let us discuss the importance of these issues. First, level of output. The level of growth rate of output may be assessed by measuring different national income aggregates such as gross domestic product GDP and national income. In the module on national income, we will learn that GDP is a measure of all final goods and services that are produced in a given year within the domestic economy. A number of other useful national income aggregates will be introduced. The overall level of output in an economy determines the standard of living of an economy. The income and hence the consumption and saving decisions of a household depend on it. In other words, higher level of output directly translate into better availability of goods and services. Thus, if US has higher level of output relative to India, then that would imply that the US citizen must be enjoying better living standards on average. If two countries have similar output level, then the country that has higher per capita output is likely to enjoy better living standards. The per capita output levels may be computed as a total output level divided by the population of the country. A higher level of output would also imply higher employment in an economy. Unemployment is one of the crucial variables that are of interest to policy makers. This is explained in this next subsection, unemployment. Policies to check the unemployment rate are popular and on the agenda of all political parties in developing countries such as India. It is defined as the number of people in the working age group who are unemployed, that is, those who are looking for jobs but are unable to find them, as a proportion of total labor force. The level of output in an economy is one of the central macroeconomic variables as it determines the level of economic activity and hence the pace of job creation. Economic growth. The sustained rise in standard of living implies higher growth. All economies strive to attain higher economic growth. A substantial volume of literature deals with growth economics. The objective of these studies is to develop optimal growth models for an economy. Since all economies are characterized by different resources, endowments, the optimal path of development for each economy is likely be different. The path is also likely to vary with the time period in which the economy is about to take off. We will elaborate on these growth models in detail in the relevant modules in this course. These models help us identifying the key factors that drive growth in the long run. Business cycles. The macroeconomic objectives of a country include not just attaining higher level of output. It is actually more important for a country to maintain a stable level of production. However, all economies experience fluctuations in economic activity. The business cycles are spells of booms characterized by rising output and falling unemployment that are sometimes followed by periods of recession when production falls while unemployment soars. Macroeconomists attempt to measure these aggregates and suggest policy prescriptions so as to minimize these fluctuations. These fluctuations bring in an element of uncertainty that is seen to adversely affect the economy. Accordingly, the measurement of understanding of these national aggregates become useful in our macroeconomics course. As we learn about classicals and Keynesians, we will see that the policy prescriptions made by economists belonging to these schools of thought can often be quite different than the classical economists would like to let the market correct on its own. The Keynesians, on the other hand, would want the government to actively intervene in the market to bring the economy out of depression. Inflation. As we discussed above, fluctuations result in uncertainty. Any uncertainty in the economy adds to instability in the investors' sentiments that might negatively affect investment and hence future rate of growth of economy. Similar to the fluctuations in output, fluctuations in prices is considered harmful for the economy. Persistently rising prices, referred to as inflation, adversely affects the living standards of people as it reduces the purchasing power of the money. The poor are seen to be the most adversely affected during inflation. Inflation thus results in rising socio-economic disparities in the society. Due to this, analysis of the determinants of inflation occupies an important place in macroeconomic analysis. Now, public debt. Every government has to incur huge expenditure in order to provide a number of goods and services. In the absence of sufficient revenue resources, the governments have to operate with budget deficits. To finance these deficits, a government often has to incur debt, which may be internal, that is, borrowings from domestic agents, or external, that is, borrowings from foreigners. International financial institutions such as the International Monetary Fund (IMF) lay emphasis on the maintaining fiscal discipline and reducing profligacy. International credit rating agencies like Standard and Poor, Moody's, etc. downgrade the international credit rating of a country that has persistent deficit and a huge debt burden, especially foreign debt. In this course, we will explore the implications of governments' fiscal deficit situations and debt burden, especially in context of the Indian economy. Now, globalization and its implications. The interdependence across countries is increasing as a result of rising globalization. All modern day economies would like to draw maximum benefits from free exchange of goods, services, capital, ideas and technologies from the rest of the world. Deregulation and lower restrictions on international transactions have facilitated international trade. May argue that this has resulted in greater benefits to all participating countries. The rapid developments in transport, information and communication have further facilitated the opening up of these economies. Of course, there are also many negative aspects of too much integration with the world economy. Some of these are discussed in the module of the recent global financial crisis. Too much opening up exposes the economy to risk and volatility. It also reduces the effectiveness and control over the outcome of domestic policies to a large extent. The study of global macroeconomic issues would equip us to understand some of these international aspects. Key macroeconomic indicators for India. India has been able to attain sustained high growth rates of GDP in the range of 7 to 8% for quite some time now, growing faster than most global economies today. In addition, the economy has been more or less successful in keeping itself insulated from uncertainties and turbulence in financial markets, although it is expected that it might not be too easy to maintain such rates of growth in future, and that doing so would require appropriate oversight and regulation. India today has emerged as an economy that has promising future prospects. The Economic Survey 2014-15 states that from the macroeconomic perspective, the economy has done fairly well in terms of several indicators such as inflation, fiscal deficit, external account balances, foreign exchange reserves, domestic demand, and exchange rate of rupee. The present section attempts to trace a few key trends in the evolution of the Indian economy, especially in terms of some of the macroeconomic indicators discussed above. Now, India's growth performance. The Central Statistical Organization CSO is responsible for estimating the national income in India. It has recently revised the national account aggregates by shifting the base year from 2004-05 to 2011-12. You will understand the concepts of base year, real and nominal GDP, etc. in the very next module. The present section outlines the growth record of Indian economy since independence. The Indian economy at the eve of independence was characterized by extreme poverty, illiteracy, superstition, very low levels of income per capita, high incidence of diseases, and high mortality and birth rates. It lacked basic infrastructure like roads, while health and education of the people suffered. Agriculture was largely neglected and subject to wide fluctuations as it was dependent on monsoons. Hence, the economy displayed very poor growth performance in this period. Thereafter, with the adoption of the planned economic development, even though substantial progress was made on many fronts, the growth rate of real gross domestic product, that is GDP, remained modest till the 70s. Figure 1 provides the trends in GDP in India from 1951-52 to 2014-15. In the 80s, as the economy began to understand piecemeal or silent reforms, the growth rates picked up somewhat, but till 1991, growth rates were extremely low. In fact, the growth rates of around 2% was often termed the Hindu rate of growth. Investments were also quite low, with a rate of gross capital formation of around 20%. As a comprehensive set of reforms in the external, financial, fiscal, monetary, private, and public sector were undertaken in 1991 to boost efficiency and competitiveness. Economic growth gained momentum, although rates of growth remained high compared to India's previous performance, yet they were modest by international standards when compared with Asian countries such as China. In the latter half of the 90s, there was loss in growth momentum owing to a number of factors, both internal and external. For example, the East Asian crisis, that is financial crisis that emerged in Thailand and later engulfed many East Asian countries, lack of effective fiscal management, poor agricultural performance as a result of bad monsoons, monetary tightening that lowered investments in the private sector, decline in public investments, and slowing down the pace of reforms. After 2003, a rise in growth rates was experienced due to a number of reasons, such as restructuring in industrial sector, reduction in domestic interest rates, resulting in higher investment, better corporate performance, resulting in increased profitability, favorable external conditions in terms of unprecedented high growth in world economy and exports, etc. As a result, GDP grew rapidly during this period, only to slow down once again after the onset of the global financial crisis that to be discussed in one of the later modules in this course. Exchange rate systems and trends in India. Today, almost all economies are open to trade and financial flows in varying degrees. Although restrictions on international trade and financial flows still exist in the form of taxes, tariffs, and controls on labor and capital movement. These have been reduced significantly in recent years. Therefore, it is important to understand the concept and trends in exchange rates that have critical implications for India's transactions, that is involving trade and capital inflows with the rest of the world. The exchange rate between currencies may be defined as the number of units of domestic currency, for example rupee, required to purchase a unit of foreign currency, let us say dollar. It is the key financial variable that affects policy decisions of the international traders, financial institutions, investors, etc., who keenly follow movements in this variable. India has adopted different exchange rate policies over time. Dua and Rajan 2010 in their study on exchange rate policy and modeling in India reviewed the exchange rate policy in India and developed a model for the rupee-dollar exchange rate. Foreign exchange market has transformed into an efficient and liquid market as against a deeply regulated one prior to 1990s. The Indian rupee has mostly depreciated against the dollar after 1993, except during the period 2003-5 and 2007-8. In both these periods, rupee has appreciated due to large inflows of capital and also because of the weakening of dollar in the global markets. In addition, the rupee has also depreciated against other currencies. However, rupee has emerged as a more stable currency over time and its volatility has reduced. This is despite the volatility observed in international oil prices and in capital, especially short term, and trade flows. The Reserve Bank of India (RBI) has able to maintain organized working in the foreign exchange market despite various disturbances in internal and external markets. The present module attempts to make the reader aware of some of the crucial macroeconomic issues and more aspects in the Indian economy. We would have more to say about these in various modules of this course. Course outline. The modules in this course are organized so as to introduce you to a few basic accounting concepts and tools at the very outset. These includes the concept of GDP, GNP and related variables and concepts of balance of payments, exchange rates, capital flows, etc. that are essential for analyzing countries' linkages with the rest of the world. Therefore, we gradually introduce a number of modules that are useful for macroeconomic analysis. We begin with fairly simple models based on a number of simplifying assumptions. The assumptions are relaxed gradually, leading to more complex models that are closer approximation of reality. First, we introduce the basic Keynesian macro model that captures the interlinkages between real and financial sectors in open and closed economies. This is followed by a more general model with flexible prices, the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model that incorporates the effects of the labor market as well, the relation between interest rates and exchange rates, the theory of inflation, theories underlying consumption and investment, demand functions, and business cycles are also dealt with in detail before introducing growth models for analyzing the determinants of economic growth in the long run. Finally, certain critical policy issues related to the external sector, for example, financing of current account deficits and implications of capital flows, India's fiscal and monetary policy, and the recent financial crisis are also explored in detail using the concept, tools, and macro models developed in the initial part of the course. Now we can summarize. The branch of economics that deals with aggregate behavior of all agents in an economy is known as macroeconomics. Classical economists believed in the free market economy with laissez-faire, that is minimal government interference. Unlike the classical economic framework, Keynes believed that active government intervention is called for to enhance aggregate demand and pull an economy out of depression. The study of macroeconomic issues is essential to understand the continuous developments taking place in global economic arena. The major macroeconomic issues related to determination of aggregate output, that is GDP, GNP, etc., and employment, national savings and investments, fiscal and monetary policies, and external indicators, for example, exchange rate and balance of payment situation. India has emerged as an economy with promising future economic prospects. The Central Statistical Organization (CSO) is responsible for measuring the national income in the country. Indian economy experienced stagnation in real gross domestic product (GDP) till the 1970s. The growth rate gained momentum after the comprehensive set of reforms undertaken in 1991, believed to have increased efficiency and competitiveness in economy. India's exchange rate policy has evolved over time as its economy has gradually opened up. Since independence, India's exchange rate policy has been a shift from a par value system to a basket of page and then to a managed floats exchange rate system.